Hello again, I am Blunty. This, as I expect, should need no clarification for anyone who finds this video, is Cyberpunk 2077. Specifically, it's Cyberpunk 2077 patch 1.62 with the new Extreme Overdrive Max Insane Path Tracing Ray Tracing mode. And this gameplay is from the last couple of weekends worth of my live streams over on the Purple platform, where yesterday I just completed my third full playthrough, where the gimmick this time was a pistols only, stealth first character build. And it was a ton of fun. And which, if you're curious about chilling out too, the full playthrough has just started going up on the secondary channel over at youtube.com/bluntnate, which I hardly ever cross-promote, but there you are. I wasn't actually planning on doing my third playthrough just yet. My plan was originally to wait until we had a release date for the upcoming massive expansion DLC, Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. I would do my third full playthrough just before that released, and we would roll right into it from there. And that didn't go to plan because 1.62 hit unexpectedly. It did those fancy new ray tracing things. I made a few videos about the feature, its performance, and a mod that helps boost performance of the path tracing to a point where it becomes more practical to use on lesser hardware than the RTX 40 series it was marketed alongside. And in making those videos, I obviously had to play the game a bit to, test it and get some gameplay for those videos. And I got hooked again, and here we are. So, new plan, I suppose I'll do a fourth full playthrough once we get a date for Phantom Liberty. But before we get there, let's have a look at everything we actually know about Phantom Liberty, and indeed the 1.7 patch we're still expecting to hit just before the DLC expansion, because it has its own new slew of gameplay features set to be the foundation for Phantom Liberty's own gameplay. Big breath. Okay, so update 1.7. If you want to skip to just the Phantom Liberty stuff, I'll put a timestamp in the video and whatever, but I would suggest you stick around for this bit too, because the 1.7 stuff is also very, very enticing. We have no date for it yet either, much like Phantom Liberty, but it seems CD Projekt Red have learned their lesson about making promises before they're absolutely sure they can deliver, because of course before the catastrophic launch of Cyberpunk 2077 originally there was, 2, 3, 4 delays? So these days I think they're not saying any kind of dates before they're absolutely sure they can deliver on those dates. My best guess would be we'll see it within the next 2 months. And the kinds of updates and new features we're expecting in 1.7 include a complete overhaul of the police system, which is perhaps the most heavily criticized part of the game's NPC/AI behaviors. Endless waves of cops would just continuously magically spawn right behind you, even if you so much as looked at a cop the wrong way, or stood too close to one for more than 15 seconds, or just walked past one too closely, and woe betide anyone who committed an actual crime, like for example smashing a citizen with your ridiculously sloppy to drive car, which I did quite a lot in the second half of my playthrough, where I got a really fun car to drive and killed many pedestrians. Whoops. Anyway, the new overhaul in 1.7 is intended to make it a lot more immersion friendly for a start, with cops' behavior being not just smarter to begin with, but having them actually drive into the area in actual cop cars, and not just teleporting directly behind your ass in complete bullshitty ways. So that alone should be a huge improvement. Next up, we're going to see vehicle-to-vehicle combat finally included. Till now, there was only a few heavily scripted sequences in the game where you could engage in active combat from a car, and not only are they extremely limited, they kind of also suck. In one of the more recent updates, I think it was 1.5, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but you could occasionally see members of the various gang factions and cops drive past you engaged in their own vehicle-to-vehicle shootouts, but you yourself couldn't actually participate in that. It just sort of happened. They drove past you in a hail of gunfire. But in 1.7 there should be fully featured and free-roaming vehicle-to-vehicle combat. How this works mechanically is yet to be detailed, but we can also expect, of course, new gigs, new side quests, and new emergent moments to come with this feature to actually, take advantage of it. And more than likely, some main missions in the Phantom Liberty DLC will use it as a core mechanic of said quests. Alongside the overhauls of existing mechanics is a rebuild of the currently very clumsy and very unsatisfying melee systems. Weapons like katanas and even the nanowire aren't too bad and can actually be quite fun currently, but other melee weapons, especially fist fighting with or without the gorilla arm cyberware, is just kind of awful. Like the hitboxes are awful, and the blocking is it's just everything is awful. It's terrible, so awful. In fact, I have never even bothered to complete the whole entire quest line called Beat on the Brat, which revolves entirely around this melee fist fighting mechanic. It sucks so bad. There's a quest line I just simply avoid doing because it's awful. So yeah, hopefully this big overhaul of this system. Yeah, well, you know what? Maybe my fourth playthrough could be a street brawler build. Could be fun. Mix a little knife throwing in there with the fist fighting. Make a little tanky bruiser build. There's also going to be some new actions in the perk trees. One would imagine this will go alongside the overhauls of Melee pretty specifically because it needs the most attention, but probably also tweaks to the tech, net running, and cyberware specific trees because the final major thing we've been told about 1.7 is more cyberware, and the rather vague statement of making cyberware more visible. Whatever that means. Many of us are hoping that that means more obvious external presentations of the cyberware we have equipped, so more character customization and uniqueness, in effect. Things like the Sandevistan on your spine showing up, like you see it in the anime on the main character, or indeed like a lot of NPCs have in the game already, including whole factions like the Borg, who are very, very visually chromed out. Hell, even rando NPCs populating the streets frequently have very obviously cybernetic prosthetics on their faces or replacing their entire limbs. Visual customization options that the player just doesn't have access to, at least without mods. All of this sounds great, doesn't it? But it's also mostly just groundwork for what we're expecting in the Phantom Liberty DLC. So what is coming with that? The Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty release date is currently unknown, and it will be the one and only DLC expansion this game ever sees. But we should expect it probably between June and September by my best guesses, with June the most likely for the 1.7 patch to precede it, and September probably the latest they might want to push this out before the end of year flood of new games start in earnest. It's being set primarily in an all-new district of Night City. It's not just new quests and stories on the existing map, hooray, but a whole new area, said to be a previously unexplored area branching from the existing map. And speculation amongst the player base seems to think that this might probably mean the Pacifica combat zone off the southwest of the map. There's already a few snippets of in-game lore, some shard information, and even some NPC voice lines alluding to the combat zone and what goes on there, and what Militech are up to out there. But in reality, it could obviously be anywhere off the existing map. There are a few points on the existing map walled off by border gates that are currently impassable and filled with extremely hostile guards who open fire on sight without any more provocation than just driving near them. Plot-wise, we're told to expect a spy thriller, which is pretty exciting because the existing side quests and gigs that dip a toe into this politically motivated espionage and infiltration genre stuff are some of my favorite quests already. The teaser trailer we have even shows V, the player character, pledging allegiance to the new United States of America, a faction who, within lore, will put V directly aligned against Night City itself. Night City, the setting for the entirety of the base game, is, technically speaking, a free city. It is unaligned with any other major political conglomerate. It is, in theory at least, a self-contained democracy. But of course, this is Cyberpunk, so in reality it's not a democracy at all. It's basically just under direct corporate control of the Arasaka Corporation, and possibly also / a mysterious AI who we learn a tiny tantalizing fraction of about in a certain side quest which revolves around a mayoral candidate and his wife. And it is a side quest, so you might have missed it, but it is definitely worth doing because it gets crazy. So yeah, we're expecting a lot of political drama, espionage, manipulations, backstabbing, double-dealing, infiltration, and undoubtedly morally murky waters. Should be pretty damn fun. And of course, within this, we'll also be meeting a whole new cast of characters, but we can expect at least some of the old ones to return too. We know that Keanu Reeves is reprising his role as Johnny Silverhand, but in what capacity? Flashbacks? Old recordings? His engram? A resurrected engram? A copy? Could be many things, as we're currently not entirely sure when this DLC actually happens. Does it happen before the various endings of the base game? Or does it happen canonically afterwards? And if so, that means one, maybe two of the possible endings in the endgame currently must be made canon. Maybe there's a new ending that'll be added that will be the official canon ending. Because, spoilers, in several possible endings, V and Johnny continuing to coexist just isn't a thing. So it'll be interesting how all that plays out. We are also, of course, getting a new big-name star playing a major role in the game in the form of Idris Elba, who will be playing a character called Solomon Reed, a member of a mysterious governmental faction called the FIA, which seems to be intended to ring the bells of the CIA and or FBI type of agencies in the player's mind. And aside from Reed being some kind of G-man working for the new United States, we know very little else about him. Well, I mean, except for the fact that he seems to have very little respect for the value of a human life, but that goes without saying because he's a government agent. Another fun new addition, though, we're getting a new in-game radio station to listen to. 89.7. Growl FM, which would normally be a fairly unnotable thing to mention in a video like this, but the gimmick here is it's actually going to be filled with music submitted by the Cyberpunk 2077 players themselves. So that's kind of neat. There's also a new community radio station with a DJ voiced by Sasha Gray, who is apparently a Twitch streamer. They're also a model and a writer. I'm told they also had a slightly different entertainment career before all that, and whatever that was, she sure seemed to work somewhere warm, because when I googled her, the images presented, she sure doesn't seem to need many clothing layers in her old 9-to-5 job. Quite warm weather wherever she was working before. Very, very, very warm. She was quite sweaty in some of the pictures I found. And adult entertainment videos. She used to do adult entertainment videos. But that is pretty much everything we actually know, or at least can fairly reliably extrapolate about Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, except for one more tidbit, which is hardly unexpected, but might burn a few players. In many cases, it will burn them again. Because it's coming to PC, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and Xbox Series S. But it will not be coming to the other launch systems Cyberpunk 2077 arrived on. The PlayStation 4, PlayStation 4 Pro, Xbox One S, and Xbox One X. All of those, now last-gen systems, were the biggest issues for the base game. That's where the massive majority of issues were living. And all those platforms have now been officially abandoned by CD Projekt Red. In fact, patch 1.6 back in September 2022 was the very last update those versions of this game will ever see. Which, considering the base game was barely considered playable on those things, is a pretty obvious decision. But hopefully it also means they're pushing a little harder for some of the tech and AI and presentation stuff in Phantom Liberty, freed now as they are from the restraints of the aged last generation hardware the base game had to try to accommodate and paid a desperately dear price for doing so. Time will tell though, and this is a big chance for CDPR to earn back some of the trust they obliterated back in December 2020 when the game launched in such a catastrophically terrible state. It took a year and 9 months or so for patch 1.6 to make this game even worth a second try in my own eyes, and I loved doing my third playthrough over the last couple of weekends of streams, so while I'm excited for Phantom Liberty, I have not forgotten about CD Projekt Red's bullshittery and, frankly, flat-out lies they got sued for by their own investors, by the way. So, yeah, grab a big old pile of grains of salt to take with anything more you learn about Phantom Liberty as we get closer. Try to keep the hype under control. Yeah, I think CD Projekt Red have earned some benefit of the doubt back in all the efforts they've done with patch 1.6 and 1.62. The game is still not perfect. I still ran into a bunch of bugs and several hard crashes during my playthrough over the weekend, but the game is so worth playing. Underneath the bugs and the issues, the game itself is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful fun. So yeah, well, I guess we'll see how we go. Thank you for watching. I am Blunty. Hopefully this has been interesting and or informative for you. Thank you as always to the patrons, and I will catch you next time.